South Africa has been pouring money into tightening its borders. Drones, biometric scanners, digital tracking systems, all designed to stop illegal entry and restore control. But this week, attention shifted from the fences to the officers behind them, because while government has been fortifying the outside, alleged corruption inside the immigration system has now been exposed. Now, authorities within the Department of Home Affairs are now being investigated for manipulating immigration processes. So that's a diplomatic way of describing a bribery scheme involving unlawful approval and fast tracking of both permits and work documentation. Now, the allegations suggest that instead of criminals breaching the border, the system has now been breached from within. So it's not about drones failing or biometric scanners glitching. It's about whether the internal controls were bypassed by the very people meant to enforce them. Now, that's where the contradiction lands. You see, over the past few months, government has pushed a hard reset on immigration enforcement. Operation Newbroom, biometric verification at raids, tighter asylum rules, and even a proposed digital population register. And so this narrative has been one of both modernization and discipline. But if internal corruption has been confirmed, it raises a far more uncomfortable question. Can you secure a border if your biggest vulnerability sits behind a desk? Now, none of that cancels the broader improvements. You see, border arrests have increased, biometric verification is expanding, and these legislative changes are already in motion. But it does complicate the picture slightly. You see, immigration control ultimately runs on trust. Trust in technology, in enforcement, and in the officials operating the system. But when trust is shaken from the inside, the problem stops becoming technical and starts becoming institutional. And that's far harder to fix than simply stalling cameras at a gate. The son of Zimbabwe's former president is spending another week behind bars in Joburg. And this time, there's no diplomatic escape hatch. Mugabe has appeared in court on charges linked to a shooting in his Hyde Park home, where a gardener on his property was reportedly left critically injured. So the son of the late Robert Mugabe, who ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years before being ousted in 2017, was arrested alongside his bodyguard after the incident. Now, the two face charges including attempted murder, defeating the ends of justice, and firearm-related offenses. Now, the firearm allegedly used in the shooting still hasn't been recovered, despite police draining his swimming pool and deploying K9 and diving units to search the property. And while the Mugabe name carries a deeply controversial legacy, it doesn't carry immunity. You see, a senior official of South Africa's Department of International Relations has clarified that family members of former heads of states don't automatically qualify for diplomatic protection. And so this case has been postponed to the 3rd of March for a formal bail application, which the state says it plans to oppose. For now, though, one of Southern Africa's most recognizable surnames is back in court, this time without the diplomatic cover. The US recently scrapped that 30% tariff on some South African exports, and for a brief moment, the crowd went wild. You see, that 30% tariff had been slapped on certain countries last year, including South Africa, making it far more expensive for local goods to enter the American market. And so when the US Supreme Court stepped in and struck it down, exporters here suddenly had more room to breathe. Except the celebration barely lasted a news cycle. You see, within hours, the White House used a different trade law to introduce a new 15% tariff on imports for almost every country. And so lower than that 30%, yes, but far broader and temporary. And so this new rate can only stay in place for roughly 5 months unless Congress agrees to extend it, which means businesses here are once again operating in one of these wait-and-see windows. So what's actually changed? Well, instead of South Africa facing a much higher penalty on selected exports, we now face a lower blanket tariff along with everything else. So some sectors benefit, but others still face separate tariffs, including parts of our automotive industry. Furthermore, AGOA, the trade deal that allows some South African goods to enter the US duty-free, is up for renewal later this year. And so this isn't a reset, it's a recalibration with a ticking time clock. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, Walmart is opening its 3rd store in South Africa, this time in Boksburg, with 21 more planned across Gauteng, KZN, and the Western Cape. Now, some game sites plan on closing and reopening as Walmart stores. SPAR has reportedly asked some of their KZN suppliers to delay part of their February payments, offering to pay half now and the rest in March. Now, this move follows weak sales, squeezed margins, the SAP rollout costs, and the sudden resignation of the CEO. And Cape Town homeowners are now challenging new property valuations, with some increases reportedly between 25 and 140%. Now, the city says that most households won't see higher rates, but ratepayer groups argue that bigger valuations could still push up monthly bills. And just a side note, if you're enjoying the show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Furthermore, if you do prefer your news on the go, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Links to those are either in our description below or our bio. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. Let's hope you're paying attention in those maths classes. Let's see what you got. The question is, which of the following is not a prime number? Is it A, 1, B, 2, or C, 5? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Now, I know load shedding makes this hard to believe, but South Africa once built an electricity system so efficient that it was globally admired. You see, in 2001, the Financial Times named Eskom the world's best power company, and it all came down to state-of-the-art engineering. So instead of scattering these small power stations across the country, Eskom built these gigantic, near-identical coal plants right next to the coal mines in Mpumalanga. And so the coal didn't travel hundreds of kilometers by truck. It moved a few hundred meters on a conveyor belt. And so that meant cheaper fuel, fewer moving parts, and lower costs per unit of electricity. The result was some of the cheapest electricity in the world. But then came the part that really set us apart. One centrally controlled national grid, not provincial systems, not competing utilities. One national system deciding in real time where power should flow, like a giant extension cord for the entire country. So, for example, if Cape Town needed more power, it could be pushed from Mpumalanga. If factories in Gauteng ramped up, the grid adjusted. And furthermore, we didn't run on edge. We had backup for our backup. And so for a while, the grid wasn't something we worried about. It was something that other countries literally studied. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is 1. You see, a prime number is a number that can be divided evenly by two numbers. The number 1 and itself. And so 2 works, 5 works, but the number 1 can only be divided by 1. And so it doesn't qualify. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, this is just your reminder. If you do prefer your news on the go, you can find us on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Links to those are either in our description below or our bio. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day further. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.